Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Bubeck, and we will be covering the topic of adaptive leadership, which is in Chapter 11 of our Northouse Leadership textbook, covering pages 257 to 292. An overview of topics you can expect out of today's lecture are defining adaptive leadership, researchers behind the approach, some history on adaptive leadership, important adaptive leader behaviors, strengths of adaptive leadership, criticisms of adaptive leadership, examples of adaptive leadership, and its relation to the dietetic field. We will dive into all of these a little deeper and discuss further in the following slides. Okay. Let's discuss what adaptive leadership is, or more simply, pose the question, what is adaptive leadership? Adaptive leadership is a process that demonstrates how leaders encourage people to adapt. This leadership style focuses on the adaptations required in response to changing environments. Adaptive leadership stresses activities of the leader in relation to the work of the followers. This leadership style also encourages and builds upon relationships that exist among the people within an organization. So hopefully you have a better idea of what adaptive leadership is, a bit of a definition, although it's quite broad. So taking a look behind the approach and into the researchers, Heifetz laid the framework for adaptive leadership, though along the years, many of his associates contributed, such as Grass-Howe, Linsky, Laurie, Sonder, Jones, Hodge, and Rowley. So he had quite a few contributors to his work, though he did lay the framework for adaptive leadership. Ronald Heifetz is the founding director of the Center for Public Leadership, and that's at John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, and he is the co-founder of Cambridge Leadership Associates. So in this picture, Ronald Heifetz is on the left side. So in this lower picture, he's on the left side. But he's also depicted with his associate Marty Linsky. To the right, you will see Marty Linsky. And Marty Linsky is a professor at the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government, and he's also co-founder with Ronald A. Heifetz of Cambridge Leadership Associates. So it sounds like the two have done lots of previous work together and are still currently doing work together at Cambridge. Some history of adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership emerged from 30 plus years of research at Harvard University by Dr. Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky. defining the frontier of leadership development. The model, proposed over the last 2 decades, fundamentally supports the assumption of leadership by multiple stakeholders with the formulation of the leadership dependent on the emergent problem. Behaviors important in an adaptive leader. There are quite a few, but to name some, an adaptive leader should be good at regulating distress, creating a holding environment, providing direction, helping people focus on important issues, empowering people, and they should also be good at giving voice to those who feel unrecognized or who feel marginalized. And in addition to all of those leader behaviors, they should be able to navigate business environments. They should be learning through self-correction and self-reflection. And they should lead with empathy. They should also be creating win-win solutions along the way. So those are all very important in adaptive leaders as behaviors. Leadership styles all have their own strengths and they all have their own criticisms. The strengths of adaptive leadership include adaptive leadership takes a process approach to the study of leadership. It is follower-centered. Adaptive leadership directs authority to help followers deal with conflicting values. Adaptive leadership provides a prescriptive approach to leadership that is useful and practical. And adaptive leadership identifies the concept of a holding environment as an integral part of the leadership process. So those are some great strengths that are identified through the process of applying adaptive leadership. Though in contrast, adaptive leadership is criticized for multiple things. It's criticized for little empirical research having been conducted to test the claims of adaptive leadership theory. Conceptualization of the process of adaptive leadership needs further refinement. Some say adaptive leadership is too wide-ranging and the adaptive leadership is too abstract. That it hints at but does not directly explain how adaptive leadership incorporates a moral dimension. That adaptive changes require long-term systematic change, and one must think about the fundamental nature of the organization. So all of these things have been criticized in regard to adaptive leadership. We have two figures on this page. In the upper left corner, we see figure 2-1, and figure 2-1 demonstrates distinguishing technical problems and adaptive challenges. The most common cause of failure in leadership is produced by treating adaptive challenges as if they were technical problems. So this is where we're seeing an issue. Instead of treating the adaptive challenges as adaptive challenges, we're treating them as technical problems. So this figure is here to help us kind of decipher, is it technical or is it adaptive? Is it a mix of both? And we're doing that by looking at the problem definition, the solution, and the locus of work. Figure 2-1 implies problems do not always come neatly packaged and either technical or adaptive. As I mentioned, they can be both technical and adaptive, as you see in figure 2-1. So the figure really does do a good job of showing the cross-connectivity of technical or adaptive and how you can link the problem definition, the solution, or the locus of work and determine the challenge. And then looking toward figure 2-3, you have 3 core responsibilities to provide. The first one is direction, the second is protection, and the third is order. Now, order has 3 subcategories, but let's focus on direction, protection, and order for now. So this means you are expected to clarify roles and offer a vision, be sure the organization is not vulnerable and can survive external threat, and maintain stability. And if you're looking at figure 2-3, you see the 3 core responsibilities on the far left column, and then above the top you can see how they can cross with technical or adaptive. And this determines the task and can help leadership from a position of authority. One example of adaptive leadership in a clinical setting concluded, complex adaptive challenges can only be addressed by patients doing adaptive work to learn new attitudes, new beliefs, and new behaviors. Adopting an adaptive leadership approach promises to improve the practice of medicine. Adaptive leadership promises to make our services more effective, more efficient, and more patient-centered and sustainable. So that study was conducted by Morrissey in 2010, and it had a focus on medicine, patients, and the clinical setting as a whole. So I found that pretty applicable to dietetics when focusing on adaptive leadership. Another example of adaptive leadership. One study explores adaptive leadership as one possible approach to school leaders, and how school leaders could consider using this approach during times of significant change. To kind of give you an example of a time of significant change for school leaders, for educators, that would be COVID, the pandemic that we're experiencing and have experienced in this past year. There were so many changes that school leaders had to put in place and experience, and using an adaptive approach really was an integral part of them making these changes, because this was a whole new experience and they were adapting to how the students would respond and what ways were best to continue educating. So that just gives you one example, an idea of what exactly a time of significant change is for school leaders. So continuing on, it requires developing specific skills necessary to enhance adaptive performance. And the concept of complex adaptive systems provides a valuable toolkit for understanding and addressing a broad range of educational issues arising. That article was in 2020, so I do think that they had a lot of education through the time of COVID on their mind when they were conducting that. So that's interesting. So there is a relationship between adaptive leadership and the dietetics field. One such study propose the adaptive leadership framework for chronic illness as a novel framework for conceptualizing, studying, and providing care. The adaptive leadership framework serves as a tool to shift focus of care to identifying adaptive challenges and collaborating to plan the adaptive work that can only be done by the person with the illness or his/her family. More connecting adaptive leadership to the dietetics field, opportunities to develop leadership skills are abundant in the field and span the practice of dietetics. Whether you are working in private sector, public, or in a consultative capacity, bridging the two, RDNs are leading the nation's efforts toward wellness and prevention in areas as diverse as long-term care, sports nutrition, and weight management. Leadership opportunities in dietetics and the field as a whole look promising. That is, if nutrition professionals position themselves to not just use their nutrition expertise, but to learn and implement leadership skills. So it is very, very likely that the opportunities are out there for you to implement leadership in dietetics, but it's just that there is that urge for many in the nutrition field, in the dietetics field, to want to use their expertise of nutrition, and we really want to have them focus on implementing their leadership skills to be the most successful in their leadership positions while also utilizing their dietetics expertise. So here are all my references. And thank you so much for listening to everything I had to talk about with adaptive leadership. All right, thank you.